everyone says write what you know. So I'm going to start with writing about medicine because that's something I know a lot about. I've been a doctor for more than 20 years. I know a lot about hospitals. Shows like Grey's Anatomy, the new one, The Pit, they're so popular, but we don't see something similar in fiction, or at least not a lot of it.
Today, we're joined by Dr. Cecelia de Gzell, a Sydney radiation oncologist and now debut author of The Swell. We'll explore her journey from medicine to storytelling and how both worlds connect. I'm Debbie, and I'm one half of the indie romance pen name Fiona Whitman. And this podcast is for indie authors who want more than just an occasional sales spike. And it's a lot easier and way more fun when we do it together. We talk about with other authors what's really working, share the experiments that my business partner and I are running in our own author career, be honest about what's working and what flops. Real conversations about building a sustainable author business from the ground up. Welcome, Cecelia, to the podcast.
So I'm actually a doctor. So I'm a radiation oncologist, and my primary focus, at least for the last sort of 10 years, has been treating patients with brain tumors. And a lot of that is patients with quite nasty cancers with short survivals, and that's a very demanding part of work. I actually work part-time because it's a very emotionally demanding type of area to work in. And look, cancer in general is emotionally demanding, but treating patients with brain cancer and talking to patients and their families about end of life, that's a really tough area to work. So I really need that balance of having a couple of days where I'm not at work and can focus on other things. I also have quite a young family. So that's, the other side of things is the busy family life, and now building into the author life as well.
When you shifted to part-time to start your author hobby, or is it now turning from hobby into a business, or how did that transition happen?
So actually it kind of happened sort of by accident, I guess. I had burnout from my job in 2019, and it was from a number of factors. I had, an incredibly, busy, difficult job. It was quite a toxic workplace that I was working in. I had a sick parent. I had a very young family, so the youngest at that stage was only a toddler. And I'd also had a chronic illness. So I actually have inflammatory arthritis, and I had it for about a decade and really took a long time to find medications that sort of helped with the pain. And because of that, normally in the past, what I had done for my sort of stress relief and mindfulness had been knitting, but my hands were so stiff and sore, I actually couldn't knit. And so I was thinking, well, what can I do as a way of sort of, helping myself and creating joy essentially? And writing was something that I loved in school. And it was, one of those things that I turned to in school, but I hadn't really done for quite a long time. And I thought, well, I'm going to sit down and write something really for myself, just for a mindfulness, exercise. And I had actually previously tried to write a book probably 5 years before that, and it was terrible, and I put it aside. So this time I thought, well, okay, everyone says write what you know. So I'm going to start with writing about medicine because that's something I know a lot about. I've been a doctor for more than 20 years. I know a lot about hospitals. So that was sort of a start. And then I sat down and thought, well, shows like Grey's Anatomy, the new one, The Pit, they're so popular, but we don't see something similar in fiction, or at least not a lot of it. And I thought partly that's because getting the medicine right is really difficult if you're not from a medical background. But the reason why something like Grey's Anatomy, I think, has been so successful and more successful than any of the other medical shows is that romantic tension, the romantic element, which certainly sort of keeps it going. So I thought, well, okay, medical drama with romantic element was sort of my starting point. And romance as a genre is the most successful selling genre internationally. And spicy romance has now come into the mainstream, whereas previously, it was kind of behind closed doors. So I thought, well, let's try and, meld all three of those sorts of ideas and see what happens. And as soon as I started writing, I just, had a clear vision for the characters and where they could go. And I thought it would lend itself quite well to a series. And I could think about, what I wanted the characters to sort of experience over multiple books. And so that's kind of where it started.
I love that because, like, as you are putting, your experience in the characters, are you using the characters that that you currently work with?
I mean, everyone always wants to ask that question. And I
Yeah,
think, you know, sometimes I'll use a seed of someone. So I might start with a particular characteristic of someone I know personally and then sort of flesh out how that could work as a character. So they're not really true representations of people I know. It might just be picking one personality trait and sort of expanding from there. It's more that how can you manipulate people into certain scenarios, really? So, if you've got these characters in your head, and maybe bits of them might have come from, interactions or things that you've seen around, but how can you manipulate them in a way where you want a specific outcome? And I think we
sure.
all kind of want to do that, right? You
Yeah.
think about things in your own life, conflict or, certain situations that you've been through, and then you run it through your head and you think, well, I wish I'd said this, or why couldn't I have done that, or couldn't it have ended this way? Like being able to manipulate characters and situations and play with how they're gonna, play out is, the one of the fun things about being an author. You get to choose, you get to decide what's gonna happen.
You're like, well, here's the outcome I want. And then maybe you do get that outcome, but it looks different than the outcome
Yeah.
you expected it to be, right?
And that kind of goes to who you are as a writer. I think there's a
Mm.
lot of different ways that people describe writers. The one that I always think about is, are you an architect or a gardener? And
Mm.
I'm a gardener. I have certain things that I want to, explore in the story, and certain plot points that I want to meet. But how they get there is kind of, well, we see how it goes. Whereas, other authors are really strict. They have, every single chapter has a clear summary of exactly the scenes that are going to play out. And that's kind of not been my experience so far. So I'm more of a let's water things and see how they grow.
You are now, kind of you're juggling being a radiation oncologist and an author and a mom and a wife and from a publishing standpoint, how do you find time for that?
Oh gosh, who knows? So, it's like the piece of blue tack that's pulled in so many different directions. It's got holes in it. I think, we all struggle with this. And I think women probably struggle with it maybe a little bit more than men, just because we do have those extra hats. We're naturally carers. We often spend more time caring for young children and often spend time caring for elderly parents as well. So we're kind of stuck in the middle and pulled in a lot of different directions. I think, having the ability to work part time is helpful because I can kind of catch up on some of the life admin as well as do the writing on my days off. But, it's not a perfect balance. And there are some weeks where I did all the laundry, but I didn't fold any of it. And so it sat in piles, and the kids are fossicking through piles to find their clothes. So, I think like everybody else, I don't always get the balance right. And it is a bit of a struggle. And just, the day to day is what's on tomorrow's agenda, what do I have to get done is tricky. But, we just keep trying. I'm a list writer. So, each day I'll have the to do list, and my
Mm.
work days, it's a different to do list than my non work days. But, I'm like you, there are still things that have got to be done. You've got to order the groceries, you've got to do the washing, you got to pick up the kids from school. It's a real struggle a lot of the time, and trying to carve out little bits of time to do writing and to now, market my book, things like that is tricky. And as I'm learning, it's like a steep learning curve for me. Everything, I'm still at the sort of the beginning stage. Things take longer than hopefully they will maybe in a couple of years' time. But it's been a very long journey and lots of learning throughout that. And I just keep taking one day at a time. I don't look too far ahead in the future. That's too scary.
Do you outsource any of the work that needs to get done?
Yeah, I definitely outsource things. I think you can't do everything yourself, certainly not when you're time poor, which I am. And a lot of it has been picking up suggestions from people along the way, making connections through other people. So one of my school mum friends actually is a fantastic graphic designer, and so she did the beautiful cover for me for my book, and put together the merchandise as well. So that was a simple thing that I could outsource to a friend. We had a meeting and we talked about what I wanted the cover to sort of look like, and she provided a number of different options. And in the end, it was the one that I really had wanted it to look like, and it fit perfectly with my vision for that. In terms of the book, I actually paid to have a publishing service put it all together and put it, onto Amazon, etc. And again, for me, that was really important because I just didn't want to spend another X number of months trying to work out how to do each individual step myself. And so it was a very well rehearsed group. They've done this for more than 5 years. So it's pretty straightforward, and that was what I needed, was to get things done quickly by the time I got to that point.
You're doing a series, correct?
Correct, yeah. Once I started writing about these characters, I really could see that I wanted to take them through the journey. We start with the main character is called Poppy, and she's starting in the first book, her very first term as a doctor. So it's the huge emotions, trauma, the swell of learning so much about her job, and that early stage of being a young adult. She's in her early 20s and her love life is a bit chaotic as well, which it fits with that sort of time period in people's lives. But I wanted to be able to follow her through, as she sort of progresses through her career, but also as her personal life changes as she grows up, and the sort of standard things that we all experience as we grow up as adults. You have the chaotic love life, then maybe you find a partner that you settle down with, and then maybe there's family, etc. So I wanted to be able to sort of mirror her life and her career trajectory, and I thought that that would work well for a series.
And then the networking aspect. You are a member of an association?
Yeah, so the Romantic Writers of Australia, and I think there's other chapters, there's the Romantic Writers of New Zealand, etc. So that was actually, I went to the first conference in 2023, and at that point, I just sort of made the decision that I was going to self-publish. And, I went there thinking I'm going to, try and learn as much as I can. I know that there was a mixture of traditionally published and independently published authors. And so I talked to a lot of people, and I was comfortable with the decision. Independent authors were comfortable with their decision. I'm like, okay, this is good. I can do this. But then there was a bit of a spanner in the works because I still pitched to some traditional agents and publishers at the meeting, and then they wanted materials, and then you delay, delay, delay. You wait 3 to 4 months to get all their decisions back. And once they all came back, I then progressed with the self-publishing, and then the editor that I chose was a contractor for this particular publishing group. And she really liked the work. And so once, we did the developmental edit and I worked through all that, she wanted to shop it around in the UK. And so then there's another delay of several months while you wait to hear back. And so finally I had the sort of line in the sand of Christmas last year. I'm like, okay, if none of the groups in the UK are interested, I should move forward with the self-publishing, because by that stage I'd written the first draft of the second book in the series and was starting to write the third. And I'm like, look, if I don't get this out, it kind of becomes irrelevant because time moves too far forward. So yeah, that's kind of where it sort of got to at the end. But the networking has been really helpful because I've met a lot of authors through that. I've got people I can tap on the shoulder and say, how do you do this? Or, am I missing something here? What else do I need to do? Just little things that, having never worked in the publishing industry, I just don't have any knowledge base for. So it's often the little things that you just need someone to tap on the shoulder and say, oh, what should I do here? The thing that I found incredibly refreshing coming from medicine was that people are so willing to share their knowledge and support each other and, help. Whereas in medicine, there's this whole culture of, protecting your patch and, it's this fight mechanism, like you're all fighting for the job or fighting for the next step. And so it's a much more toxic environment. So coming into the sort of author world, even when you, as you say, you're sort of writing on your own, you're in your own little silo. But when you do reach out and say, hey, look, I need help with this, or I'm really not sure what to do here, people are actually really friendly and really willing to offer their advice and provide feedback. So that's been really refreshing. It's a really nice community to join. And yeah, let's make it all better so we all do well. And yeah, I really like that. I like that about the writing community. I think people are very generous and very friendly, and that's really nice.
What kind of social media have you done so far?
I think from social media, look, I'm still learning. I mean, like everything else, I feel that I'm sort of at the beginning of that sort of journey. I do a lot of Instagram. That's where I've sort of put the focus. It does push through to my Facebook account as well. I find that anything where I'm like recording myself or talking seems to be more effective or gets more likes or more interactions than just posting about books. So I'm trying to work out how to keep moving that forward and hopefully connect with more people. I'm keen to do more interview style podcasts, writer talks. I think that's probably a better way for me to connect to people. I like to talk to people, so that's sort of something that I think might work for me.
Love that you are, kind of feeling your way through your journey. You're not reacting to, oh, I've got to do this and chasing that, or I've got to do this and chase that.
Well, I mean, partly it's just I don't have the time and or the money.
Yeah.
So I'm just
Yeah.
really trying to start simply and see where it goes. Because I have so much stress in my normal sort of doctor hat job, I'm trying not to bring that into the author side of my life just because it's there for, creating joy and keeping that hopeful aspect of life available. It's good for my mental health. It's fun, it's enjoyable. I love the writing. So, the marketing and everything else, I don't want it to be overwhelm me because I've already got enough of that in my day job.
I look at all the successful people in different, careers and the way that they were told no 100,000 times before, they blew up. Said they were overnight successes after, 5
Ah,
years or something
yes.
like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, look, even in, the parallel to my real work, in medicine, like I didn't become a specialist when I started,
Mm.
it was a 10-year program. And even once I became a specialist, and I did a PhD and I did all these other things, I've been a specialist for 15 years basically. So nothing happens overnight. And you're right, trying to set that expectation for your own sanity is really important. And at the moment, I'm just happy that people who are reading it are enjoying the book and, want to read the next one. And so that's the great starting point to be at. And little by little, it will progress and reach new people. In an ideal world, at some point, maybe I could transition from one job to the other. But, again, that might be a long prospect. Who knows? Enjoying the journey too. I think that's also important, right? The one thing I learned from my medical work is that none of us know how long we have on the planet. And, it is really important to make time to actually appreciate your life, enjoy your life, do the things that you actually want to do, whether that's, goal orientated or just having this particular holiday or going to this particular film or reading this particular book. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as each day there's something in your day that you enjoy and that you actually appreciate that. I think that's really important for a happy life.
Well, also important for content if you want to stay creative,
Uh,
right?
yeah, I think that's a really good point. But could you make a good book out of it? You possibly could. An effective way of conveying that kind of scattered thinking and how that then affects the character. But you're right, you'd have to slow it down yourself so that you could get that across effectively. At some point, hopefully, it becomes a business. I think people who are successful, that is what it becomes, obviously. And then, you are constantly in that contract with your readership that you're providing the particular type of story that that readership it wants to read, and then they will continue to buy, which makes the business successful. So I think we all want to get there eventually, but I think like a lot of small businesses, things don't always proceed that way. You might have the best of intentions, but it might not go that way, in which case you still got to remember that the success is you wrote a story that you're really proud of, and people who read it like it. And, that's the sort of the beauty of creating something like that out of nothing, is creating something that people actually believe in. So that's lovely.
What I hear in there is you're connecting with me, connecting with you. And I mean, like, I go back to, I think Shonda Rhimes did the Grey's Anatomy series, right?
Yeah.
Her commitment is to connect with the viewer. Um,
Absolutely. And she's done that very well, hasn't she? The thing that I've really loved in this early point, so the book was only released in June, so it's really only still just over 2 months down the track. And I love it when people then message me, through social media or personally, and send me a picture of them reading the book and say, "Oh my God, I cried, I laughed, I can't put it down. I've got to finish it. I just, when's the next one coming about?" So you're right, it's that connection. I think any author is so pleased if a reader says to them, "I was invested in the characters. I wanted to know what was going to happen. I was waiting. I didn't want to put it down, but I also didn't want it to end." That's a huge compliment to an author. It means you've done your job right. You've created characters that readers will connect with, and they want to know what's going to happen to them. And so, yeah, for me, that's been the best part of the journey so far, is seeing that in my readers. Probably the one thing that I would share as well as the title. So the first book called The Swell, and the cover, it shows Bronte Beach in Sydney and Poppy, who's the main character, holding a surfboard with her stethoscope essentially. And the reason I chose that particular title is I did want to make it appealing to readers and have that beach aspect, because obviously in Sydney we are blessed with a lot of beautiful beaches, and people know that about coming to Australia. And so during the first book, Poppy actually learns to surf. One of the other doctors teaches her how to surf. And, each of the books in the series will have a title that connects to the beach. And this particular one, The Swell, I thought fit really well with, working in an emergency department. It's often chaotic, things will build up, there'll be tension, there'll be trauma, dealing with difficult cases, and it crashes, and then you have to sort of deal with that emotional aspect of working in a difficult environment. But equally, her love life is a bit like that as well. There's a lot of tension, and how will this work out between the characters, and is this the right thing for Poppy? So this particular one called The Swell, I thought fit really well with the storyline for both Poppy in her private life, but also in her work life. And the second one is Caught in the Undertow, which is all
mm,
about the sort of, being caught in a rip. I don't know if you've ever experienced being caught in a rip, but how sort of scary and overwhelming that is. And that's because in the second book, it starts a year later than the first one, and it's the beginning of the COVID outbreak. And it's that feeling of, being dragged along with no power over what's going to happen. So again, I thought that worked quite well for the second story. So I kind of want them all to have that beachy connection, because we have that in Australia, a lot of beautiful beaches.
surfing is one of those sports that, there's always a hot guy involved. You're right.
Yes, it seems that way.
What is that
Oh,
about?
I don't know. I think it requires a lot of good core strength, so maybe that helps.
I tried to learn how to surf several times, maybe 10 times I've tried,
Wow.
with different boyfriends. Yeah, and yeah, turmoil,
Well,
you
maybe you
know?
can connect to this better than I
Oh,
can.
completely. I'm so reading this book. I'm just telling you right now. When's the next book coming out?
So it goes off to my editor next week. So hopefully by early next year, it should be hitting stores. So yeah, keep your eye out for that.
Back to your editor real quick. Is that outsourced through your publisher or did you meet them through your association?
So the first one, so the Swell, was actually through the publisher, and actually
Mhm.
they had one in-house, and then they had a number of contractors, and I chose one of the contractors. But this time around, I'm using a different editor, and that has been through a number of people I've met through the Romance Writers Association. You really do need, especially for me starting out, I have not done a master's of creative
Mm.
writing. I'm not a copy editor. I've not worked in the publishing industry. I think it is really important to get a professional to go through your manuscript with a fine tooth comb and help you make it better. And I know that in the first book, The Swell, doing that process did make the book better. She automatically, one of the first things she said was, you've got to get rid of the first three chapters. You've got to start in the action, and then you
Yeah.
can drip feed that sort of background information, further along through the chapters. But it's too slow otherwise. And I think that reflects our general concentration. If you look back at old movies, old books, they were a lot more descriptive. They were a lot slower to grab your attention. Whereas we are busy, we are time poor, we want to be grabbed straight away. If you
Yeah.
watch a Netflix show and it's not grabbing you within 15 minutes, you
You're
turn
done.
it off,
Yeah.
and you go to something else. And I think,
Yeah.
that's what has happened in the book industry as well. We don't have these long, wordy descriptions. We are straight to the point, have the pace so that you can grab the reader in and keep them interested. And so that was a big thing for me to change, and I think it made a huge difference. Obviously, there are a lot of other things as well, but from a starting point, really getting that across and going, you know what, you've got to just get it in quicker. Find some way to grab the reader in that first chapter, otherwise you're going to lose them.
You have to consider Amazon is allowing you to sneak peek as a reader in chapter 1, so you've gotta grab their, interest, and if
Right.
it's not grabbing you by chapter 1, they're not buying your book.
For the first book was that I actually put a prologue in, and actually it's pretty confronting, the prologue, and I really wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. I actually ended up writing two different versions, and I went with the more confronting version. The prologue is not actually about Poppy, and it's not written in her voice. It's a minor character that comes up later in the book, and it's a very confronting scene. And I constantly ummed and ahed, thinking, "Oh, is this going to put readers off?" But interestingly, a lot of people have come back to me and said, "Oh my God, that was so confronting," but it made me want to work out what the hell, how does this connect to the main character? So hopefully that balance is there. I really wanted light and dark in the book. Medicine is often a lot of really difficult things to go through and traumatic events. So I think the romance element really lightens that up. So it's not all about the trauma and the difficult things that Poppy's experiencing for the first time as a baby doctor. The romance and the sort of brevity around being a 20-something-year-old and going out and drinking and flat sharing and things like that helps balance out some of that darkness. Hopefully that's hit the mark.
Thank you so much. Where can we find you? I know you said you're on Amazon, but you're also where else?
So my website is cedegazellauthor.com. I'm on Instagram, ce_de_Gazelle_author, and on Facebook, Ce de Gzell.
That's it. Well, I thank you so much for your
No, thank
time. I
you.
know
Thank
it's
you for having
limited.
me.
for being time poor. I really appreciate your generosity with us just to share what's there for you in your world. And I just admire the amount of lives you've saved and the amount of just dedication you have to being a doctor to cancer. And I just thank you so much for being that person. We need
Oh,
your humanity out there. So thank you for that. And
oh no,
I'm
you're
looking
very
forward
welcome.
to reading your book.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you very much for having me. It was really lovely to be able to talk about this. And, this helps me be a better doctor because it keeps me sane.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, here are 5 practical steps that inspired me by my conversation with Cecelia. 1, carve out creative time, even just 15 minutes a day to recharge. Turn challenges into opportunities and let struggles spark new ideas. Mix real life with imagination to create something uniquely yours. Find your community, the people who lift you up and share knowledge. And lastly, treat growth as an experiment. Stay flexible and give yourself patience along the way. Thank you for joining us today. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be here with us. We'll be back next week with more to share. Until then, take care.